The Truth About Male Suicide, Part 2. In Part 1, we examined some of the reasons for men being 4 times more likely to suicide. Those reasons included the cultural indifference to men's pain, a man's quiet and active mode of healing that moved him away from others, the standard shaming of men and boys for any sign of dependency, and the perils of precarious manhood. In Part 2, we'll finish by looking at the impact of biology, the male hierarchy, and the cultural devaluation of men, and how those things impact his greater likelihood to suicide. Then there's the biological aspect to this. Men get 10 times more testosterone than women, and we're now learning some fascinating things about testosterone. For years, scientists have been unsuccessful in trying to connect testosterone with aggression. With improved research techniques, they now know that rather than being related to aggression, testosterone pushes men to strive for status and to protect that status once gained. Men, and to a lesser degree boys, are built to strive for status. Wanting to succeed, wanting to win, wanting to be good at something, and working towards that are all now known to be related to testosterone. It's easy to see how winning and succeeding are important to men and boys, and also are the antithesis of dependency. When we win, we're far from dependent. Boys and men are not only socially conditioned to be independent, they're pushed in the same direction by their biology. Independence equals success. Dependence equals failure. Another impact of testosterone that's been verified recently is that it reduces fear and increases willingness to take risks. This adds some strength to Joyner's ideas about fearlessness in men. If you look at the factors we're discussing separately, they don't make much sense. Why push boys to not cry? Why try and win all the time? Why does precarious manhood push men to repeatedly prove their manhood? Why would testosterone push men to strive for status and take risks? Each by itself doesn't make much sense. But if you look at them working together, it begins to add up. All of these things are helping men in what is being called the masculine hierarchy. Bighorn sheep butt heads to determine which male will have access to the top-rated females, right? Yep. What scientists are now finding is that human males also live in a hierarchy. And like the sheep, the bottom line of the hierarchy is reproductive access. Precarious manhood, testosterone, the desire to win, and not being seen as dependent are all factors in moving upwards in the male hierarchy. None of this really makes much sense until you realize that women really, really like high status. That is, high status men. Men of high status, like millionaires, senators, professional sports players, famous musicians, all have a much better chance of attracting the top women than most guys on the street. These men are high in the male hierarchy. All men know this and will work hard to be as high in the hierarchy as they can, knowing that higher status means a better chance of success with very attractive women. So really, the parents discouraging their sons from crying in public is done not as a crazy and inexplicable act, but as a way to help him be higher in the hierarchy. They want their son to succeed. Same with precarious manhood. The pushing of males to repeatedly prove their worth is just another way to push him higher in the hierarchy. Testosterone does something similar when it pushes men and boys to strive for status. It's this striving for status that has literally built much of modernity. It's nothing to sneeze at. Men live in this hierarchy each day. In fact, their lives are surrounded by hierarchy. What are men's favorite sections of the newspaper? Sports and business, right? What do those have in common? Hierarchy after hierarchy. Things are broken down to who is first, second, third, and on and on. IBM stock up today. Dow up, but the NASDAQ down at the close of trading. RBIs, batting averages, quarterback ratings, and a host of sports stats are the domain and love of many men. Think hierarchy. Who's first, second, third, fourth. Many men enjoy this, and women are often perplexed. For a video explaining hierarchy and men's healing, see the upper right. The hierarchy is what it is, but it does have some lethal effects when it comes to suicide. Men will strive to stay up in the hierarchy as high as they can, but this means putting on your best face whenever possible. Put your best foot forward. In order to maintain your place in the hierarchy, you don't want to share your failures, your dependencies, or your depression. That drops you like a rock. This puts men into a very dangerous place of needing to not show their vulnerabilities and dependencies. Their lives have often been filled with striving for status and trying to put a successful face on for the public. Women often do not understand this. They think that he should just get over it and start talking about stuff. But wait a minute. Women have a very similar hierarchy. It's called attractiveness. Women do their best to put their best foot forward when it comes to their appearance. While men's hierarchical involvement is more global and touches nearly every sphere of his life, a woman's hierarchy is more limited to her attractiveness. Just as status is one of man's tickets to reproductive success, the same is true for women and attractiveness. And most women work hard at this. Just a quick look at the $64 billion cosmetic industry should give you a sense of how important this is. Just for reference, the NFL, Major League Baseball, and the NBA bring in a combined revenue of about $26 billion. That's less than half of the cosmetics. So women work hard to stay as near the top of their hierarchy as possible, and they spend quite a bit to do so. Have you ever heard of a woman refusing to leave the house without her makeup? Can you see how this is similar to the men? She wants to put her best foot forward and be able to mask her imperfections, just like the men want to mask their own lack of independence. The difference is that women's decisions to not go out without her makeup tends to have much less severe consequences than a man's reticence over his depression. Depression is seen as failure, a status-dropping weight that needs to be fixed privately, and he's all too often left alone in the weight of his troubles. Devaluing men. There's one more factor that's rarely discussed that I think we need to have at least a mention. That's the devaluation of men and boys. China is one of the only countries in the world where women commit suicide more than men. This chart shows 3 Western countries and then China. Notice that all of the Western countries appear to have men outnumbering women in completed suicide. China, however, flips that and shows that female suicide in China actually outnumbers males. Why would this be? Why would almost every Western country show men to outnumber women in suicides, but China has more female suicides? Most of the theorists point towards China's devaluation of women as being the cause. They say that women in China are seen as inferior. Boy babies are preferred to the point of aborting girl babies in order to have a male. Valuing males over females, say the theorists, must create an environment where the females are more likely to take their own lives. I tend to think their assessment is at least partly correct. But what does that tell us about our own country? I think a case can be made that in our country, it's the men who are devalued. Men are seen as inferior, and this devaluation impacts men and boys in the U.S. in the same way theorists are posing that it impacts girls and women in China. Just look at how easy it is to bash men. Imagine yourself in public commenting that men are jerks. What response would that bring? I've seen this often and no one bats an eye. Most people just nod. But now think what would happen if you proclaimed women were jerks. I've seen this one too, and can tell you that what I've seen is people immediately defending women and castigating you for saying such a thing. This is a huge, unrecognized double standard. It's not uncommon for people to laugh at men, for men to be forgotten when it comes to their emotional pain, for men to be devalued and used as cannon fodder, to die on the battlefield. 97% of male deaths on the battlefield, and in dangerous jobs, 93%. Could it be that this devaluation of men and boys plays a role in their greater numbers of suicides? I'm guessing yes. I hope you're starting to get an idea of why men might commit suicide more often than women. Let's summarize the factors we've discussed in parts 1 and 2. 1. Cultural indifference to male suicide from both the general population and from professionals. 2. Joiner's ideas that men are more fearless. 3. A man's emotional pain is taboo. 4. Big boys don't cry and knowing there's no support. 5. Disallowing dependency in men. 6. Precarious manhood. He's got to face a lifelong judgment about his manhood. 7. Men's healing through action or inaction, which moves them away from possible human intervention. 8. Testosterone and its push to strive for status while limiting fear. 9. Men and hierarchy, putting your best face forward. And 10. The devaluation of men and boys. This leaves men in a very difficult spot. Man's emotional pain is taboo in our culture. No one wants to hear men's emotional pain, and no one wants to be around it or even be a part of it. So when you're suicidal, do you have emotional pain? Yes. And is anyone willing to deal with men's? No. People are basically allergic to men's emotional pain, and they act on this every day. On one side, men have a wall of indifference towards this emotional pain. People just don't care. He's been taught that his pain is something he should keep to himself and that there will be no help available to him. No one cares about his pain. So the first force we see is that men's emotions are actively ignored, and he responds by dealing with it on his own, often privately through action or inaction. Then we have the next huge factor, which is that people see men not publicly displaying their emotion, and rather than understand his obvious need to be private in his healing, they now claim that he's not dealing with his feelings. He's cold and unfeeling. He can't handle his emotions, or a host of other crazy assumptions, which now shame him for his private ways of healing. This is a lethal double standard. He's closed in by a wall of taboo on one side, and then another wall on the other that claims he's intentionally hiding his pain and making a choice of not being open about his emotions. Crazy, right? These two walls are undesirable, but somewhat understandable due to gynocentrism and the historical cultural importance of men providing and protecting for women and children. Each of these tendencies could be traced back to gynocentrism. This is the recipe that has been successfully used to build our culture. Men have kept things safe through their willingness to risk, to be independent, and strive for status. Men are starting to become aware of this automatic sacrifice and are starting to choose instead to go their own way. This is a very important cultural shift. But then along comes feminism, and these two walls got an extra force from above. Now men were not only pushed away due to a taboo, shamed for their quiet ways. No, now they're blamed for the problems of the world. Men were oppressors. Men were pigs. Men have selfishly had all to themselves, and now it was women's turn. The underlying assumption is that men owed for their past indiscretions and don't deserve to have emotions. They certainly don't deserve compassion. I hope you can see from this video that we've been making some very poor assumptions about men and emotions. Our present psychological services are built based on what women need and want. They are far from what we can be helpful to men. The next video in this series will look at what sorts of changes we need to make in order to develop services that are truly male-friendly. And in the meantime, come help me at Patreon. I could use your support. And let's not forget, men are good, as are you. Comment, subscribe, share, all that stuff. We'll see you.